I was freelance about 10 years ago or so, and I got a call out of the blue from someone I used to know who headhunts, who does recruitment, and it kind of made me think, oh, yeah, maybe it is worth having your name out there with a few people. It's about contacts, you know, and it's about having the kind of knowledge of who you are in the right hands. And so they were just looking for a deputy editor on this magazine, and I was passionate about gardening. I happened to be writing in a completely different field at the time. I was writing about music, but I had been a deputy editor on a gardening magazine a few years before, and that's where my name first came up. And so, you know, I got the call, and I met the then editor, and I met the then publisher, and we were at the BBC at the time. And I very much liked the idea of working at the BBC as well, because I really respected the institution. So, but it came ultimately from a passion for the subject. I'm a gardener, I'm a journalist, I'm an editor, but I'm also a gardener, and so I could feel a connection with the audience, and I think that really, really matters. I think one of the probably most satisfying, because it took a lot of chasing, was we managed to persuade Prince Charles to write for us exclusively about why he's so passionate as a gardener. And because he's very famously a gardener and a tree hugger, you know, which is the sort of, you know, this term everybody uses about him, but he's absolutely passionate as a gardener. And what I really wanted to get from that was a sense that Prince Charles was actually just like all the rest of us when we garden. You know, a great pleasure of plunging your hands in the soil, planting, raising seeds, turning something from you know, from nothing into absolutely something, creating something that is a legacy, and that's what gardening is about, and that's what came through in his interview. So it was lovely. It personalised him. You know, it brought him to a level just like all of us. He's a gardener at core. We asked him to write about 2,000 words about his passions as a gardener and why it was so important for him that he was an organic gardener, and what that legacy he feels he's leaving as a gardener. So taking him out of the sort of political and royal arena, but and yet always aware of the fact that he's a very important person. People across the world are fascinated by what he says, and his influence and reach is enormous. So we wanted to share that and to show some of the importance of that, and to get from him in his own words why gardening has helped make him who he is. The biggest challenge actually was the fact that he's asked by lots of magazines and newspapers and TV programmes, you know, everybody wants a bit of him and they want to have his opinion. And because I was determined that I wanted his words, I didn't want to send someone to interview him because it's just another interview. I wanted to get the real man, I wanted to get him. So we kind of held out to make sure we got his words. So the first thing is always, you know, you have to make contact with the press office, and it's never the main decision maker in the press office, so we had to persuade them. I had to bring in various allies, so I kind of researched around and made sure I knew who knew us, who also knew him. With that particular piece, I think, you know, we ran up against deadline, because of course the process took, you knew it was going to take a long time, but inevitably, you know, your deadlines come up thick and fast, and you kind of think, oh, you know, are we going to make it through? Are we going to actually hit the deadline? Are we going to have to, you know? So I made a few phone calls just to check that we were still okay. So that was really the only problem, was deadline. Well, hopefully you can solve a problem by hopefully making sure it doesn't arise in the first place. I think problems sometimes arise for two reasons. One is something completely out of the blue that's not in your control, and then you have to be quite nimble-footed and work with the team to work around it. The other circumstance under which problems arise is actually if perhaps you haven't briefed one of the team, or one of the team hasn't realised there's a really important factor involved and it hasn't been appreciated. So now then it's all about communication, and it's you thinking, did I communicate that properly? If not, let's regroup and just try and establish what the issue might be. Well, probably being threatened with legal action. So a singer, pretty high-profile singer, claimed that a lot of the interview that I commissioned a freelancer to write and to send in and to work on, her claiming it didn't happen. But of course, what we actually had were tapes that substantiated it. And, you know, behind that claim actually lay a much bigger problem that she was having in her personal life. So we were able to work with the press office and, it was, you know, who actually set the whole interview up to start with. And so, you know, but it goes on, and you have to spend lots of time with lawyers, and it's the least interesting place to be as a journalist. You really don't want to have to go face to face with lawyers. So, you know, it resolved itself. It meant that we missed a front cover for 1 month. It just meant we had to push something back. So it meant that we had to find another story that would fit the front cover, which at short notice, you know, and that was in the celebrity area that I was working at the time. You know, it can be really hard to pull off the right cover at the right time, and, you know, a lot of planning goes into this. So that was probably the worst day, was just the realisation that my big plans for that issue had crumbled. I might be in court, we might be sued, it might cost the company a lot of money. Even though I knew that what we'd done was absolutely right, you never know when it comes to legal matters which way a court will go. So you don't want to go to court for a start. So if you don't want to sit in front of a lawyer, you really don't want to go to court. So, you know, it's always that kind of unknown that unfurls in front of you. That's usually the kind of worst day. Tricky one as an editor. As a journalist going out there, you know, I was editor at the time, but I went out as a journalist to interview Luciano Pavarotti. And he's a pretty weird guy. It's just having the unknown thrown at you, like you can't wear purple, and you can't sit in the same room with him, you know, you can't have him facing the light, you can't do this, that and the other. So that's kind of weird, and when they go off track, you know, as an interviewer, that's difficult, you know, putting them back on board again. But as an editor, it's, you know, it's usually when something unexpected happens that you just hadn't anticipated. And sometimes you've just got to work with the team, you know, to all put your head on it and find the way out. I guess every issue comes out and you think there's something new in it, and that's part of the excitement, is that every month, as a monthly magazine, every month we get to create something new, and so there's always something in there every month you feel really proud about, and you know, and this month is just the same. I've literally, just before coming here, literally just had these delivered from the printer, and I haven't looked at it yet. And I know it's a really big issue for us. Our May issue is the #1 big issue of the year, so, you know, I kind of can't wait to look through it, and of course I'll look through it critically and kind of go, oh, you know, maybe there's a typo which you hope there isn't, or there's a picture that you haven't quite anticipated. But you know, in terms of overall most proud, I suppose there's a couple of features. I mean, one was, I mentioned Prince Charles wrote for us, and the first time he'd written for a gardening magazine, and so I was really pleased about that. And the other was the current lead presenter of Gardener's World is Monty Don, and I got him to write a very personal piece about his garden and how he started gardening. Because gardening works on this annual cycle, of course, I can't recreate in real time March or April again. We have to do stuff in real time. So we're photographing now in April. We're photographing for April 2014, and in fact starting projects for April 2015. So we work on a really long-term cycle. There aren't many other areas that work quite so far ahead as us. So gardening is really particular because you know, even when you're writing about food, you know, you can recreate Christmas in July because all you've got to do is go and buy a turkey and buy some of the trimmings and get the supermarkets to help you source that product. But as a gardener, I can't go out there and recreate spring in the middle of autumn, even though the middle of autumn would suit our production cycle much better. So you've got to be really well planned and far ahead. So I'm at the moment planning a lot of our content for 2014 at the same time as all of our issues are going through for 2013. So it's slightly Jekyll and Hyde. You've got to think ahead to what 2014 is going to look like. It's such fun, you know. I know we shouldn't say, oh yes, it's all very hard work, but ultimately, if it's not fun, don't do it. It should be fun because, we're not an essential part of day-to-day living for people. They've got to feel that they want to, buy into a little bit of the luxury that you produce. Magazines, websites, we're not essentials in life. We're the nice stuff. And if you're not having fun producing the nice stuff, then it won't come across as good and fun. And that's what you want your audience to come to you for some rest and relaxation.